On the day I married the most admired young nobleman in the capital, the entire city envied me. But that night, after the wedding guests left, my husband didn't even lift my bridal veil. He walked out of the room and left me alone. For a year, he barely spoke to me. Then one night, I followed him into his study, and I discovered why he married me. On our wedding day, I received the highest honour a woman of my background could possibly dream of. The famed young Marquess of Loo, darling of the capital, fresh from the examinations, poems following him like stray cats, came to fetch me in person. He rode at the head of his bridal procession in scarlet court robes, a vermilion plume on his hat, banners pouring down the street like a river of red silk. 10 miles of carriages, chests, lacquered boxes, musicians, lanterns. The neighbours in our little lane nearly crushed each other at the doorway trying to see. "Look at that," one of my cousins whispered behind the sedan curtains. "He's really come himself. Elder sister, you've walked into a storybook." Yes, the storybook kind, where the girl gets a prince, 10,000 tales worth of dowry, and her mother no longer has to worry about lamp oil. At the Luke residence, the gates stood wide open. Lions of carved stone wore fresh scarlet sashes. Gongs and drums shook the street. I stepped down from the sedan chair on trembling legs while someone shouted blessings, and the old madame of the Luke family wept theatrically into her veil at the sight of me. My husband-to-be, Luke Juyuan, stood waiting on the red carpet. Everyone said he was handsome. He certainly looked the part. Tall, straight, brows like ink strokes, a smile that could have sold poems by the dozen. I looked up through my veil and thought, he looks like someone else's dream. In the main hall, he took the wine cup and lifted it high. "In the presence of our honoured guests," he said, voice warm and clear, "I, Lu Juyuan, have at last married the woman of my dreams. From this day forward, we shall share one heart, one life, and grow old together until both our heads are white." The hall sighed in unison. I heard someone actually sob. I smiled until my cheeks ached. My hands, hidden in my wide sleeves, were damp with sweat. I told myself, "Lucky. You are the luckiest girl in the city. Don't tremble like a fool." Later they carried me to the bridal chamber amid jokes and firecrackers. Red candles burned with tall, steady flames. The bed curtains were embroidered with paired ducks and lotus flowers. The maids helped me sit on the edge of the bed, then withdrew with knowing glances. The door closed. The music outside faded. Lu Juyuan stood before me, strip of red silk still binding our sleeves together. Behind the wedding paint, my mouth was dry. I waited for him to lift the veil, to say something, anything at all. He stared at me for half a breath, and the smile on his face went out like a candle snuffed by a sudden wind. He didn't lift the veil. He didn't sit. He didn't say a tender thing to the bride he had just promised to love in front of half the capital. He tugged the silk strip free with a jerk, turned away, and knocked over the bridal wine with his sleeve. The 2 cups clattered to the floor, the sweet wine soaking into the red carpet like spilled blood. "Servants," he snapped. "Out." The maids, who had been waiting outside to tease us, peeped in, saw his face, and vanished as if a broom had swept them. I tried to speak. "My lord, I—" "Sleep if you like," he said without looking at me. "The day has been long." Then he walked out, taking the candlelight with him. The door closed again. This time it sounded very final. So that was how my fairy tale ended, sitting alone on the bridal bed, while outside the city still envied me. The next morning at dawn, I rose to serve tea to the old madam like a proper daughter-in-law. That was what good wives did, the matchmaker had said. Serve tea, manage the inner household, obey your elders, never complain. Especially when you had flown far above your station and landed in an aristocrat's nest. So I did everything exactly right. In the months that followed, I memorized the names of every steward and maid. I learned which servants stole an extra bowl of rice, who had an old mother in the countryside, whose husband drank. I smoothed quarrels, kept accounts, inspected the kitchens. I woke before dawn to pay respects to his mother, bowed in the appropriate order during ancestral rites, smiled at visiting aunts until my cheeks went numb. I was perfect. My husband never looked at me. At first I thought I must have offended him somehow. Perhaps my bow was a little too low. Perhaps my veil had slipped at the wrong moment. Perhaps the way I held the teacup reminded him of an enemy. I watched him closely, hoping for some hint. What I saw was this. He spent his mornings at court or in the outer offices with his retainers, laughing and drinking and discussing edicts. At noon he'd return, exchange a few courteous words with his mother, nod at me as if I were a particularly uninteresting piece of furniture, then shut himself in his study. And in that study there hung a painting. It was an ink landscape, a narrow stone bridge, a willow tree leaning over a slow river, distant hills fading into mist. Under the tree, on the bridge, stood a woman in pale robes, her face half turned as if listening to a voice just out of frame. The first time I saw it, I thought, how peaceful. The second time, after watching my husband stare at it for a full hour without blinking, I thought, how rude. The servants began to whisper. Servants always do. The young master is different from other men, one said. He cares nothing for women, only for poetry and painting. Maybe the Marchioness is too plain, another suggested. She doesn't talk much. You talk too much, the older kitchen aunt snapped. Do you want your tongue cut out? But rumours grew like mould in damp corners, no matter how often you scrubbed. Soon the city joined in. They say Lord Lou has someone else in his heart. I heard he was forced to marry that girl because her family's horoscope suits his. Which family is the true beloved from? Perhaps a courtesan? A famous widow? After half a year of this, I stopped feeling merely hurt. I started feeling curious. One morning, while the house was quiet and even the old madam was napping after a heavy lunch, I saw my husband crossing the covered walkway between the front hall and his study. He almost made it past me. I stepped neatly into his path and bowed. My lord husband. He halted, brows lifting slightly. Yes? His tone suggested I had interrupted the important business of breathing. I armed myself with a sweet smile. I have heard some unpleasant talk outside, I said. They say you intend to take another wife. I fear it reflects badly on the household. Might I ask which young lady has been honoured, so that I may begin preparing the second mistress's apartments? That got his attention. His expression darkened. Who told you this? Tea-house gossip, I suppose. I widened my eyes innocently. You know how people are. They love a romantic tale. A neglected first wife, a true beloved brought home at last. It makes such good drama. I'll see to it that these tongues are silenced, he said coldly. There is no such thing. I tilted my head. No such thing? No other wife, no beloved, he said. You are Marchioness of this house. Remember that. Then I shall put away the extra wedding silks, I said lightly. It would be a shame to waste them. He stared at me a heartbeat too long, as if trying to decide whether I was mocking him, then turned away with a huff of sleeve. To the city, we remained a perfect couple. Inside the Lou residence, I might as well have been a shadow. Very well, I thought. If he would not give me truth, I'd steal it from the one thing he cared to look at, the painting on his study wall. A month later, on a night when he returned late from a banquet smelling of wine and incense, I bribed the guard outside his study. The poor man tried to refuse the silver at first. Madam, if the young lord finds out, he won't, I said pleasantly, because you were never here. You left to relieve yourself. You saw nothing. Do you understand? He understood. Coin always helps understanding. I slipped into the study and hid myself behind the large bookcase in the corner. pressing my back against the cold wood. Dust tickled my nose. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted iron, willing myself not to sneeze, not to cough, not to breathe too loudly. After a while, footsteps. The door opened with a soft creak. Lu Zhiyuan stepped inside, closed it carefully, and walked to the low couch in front of the painting. A single oil lamp burned on the table. Its light turned the ink strokes in the silk into pools of dark water. He shrugged off his outer robe, sat, and poured himself a cup of wine with slow, deliberate motions. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, I noticed how tired he looked, a faint blue shadow under his eyes, a line carved between his brows. He drank the cup in one swallow. Then he leaned back against the couch and went still. Completely still. I waited for the rise and fall of his chest. Nothing. His eyes were open, fixed on the painting, but the gaze had gone glassy, as if someone had blown out the candle behind them. My heart tripped. Had he died? Just like that? In his study, with a wife behind his bookcase he didn't know about? For a very improper moment, I considered staying quiet. Imagine the scene. Morning comes, servants discover their young lord dead. I emerge from the shadows, weeping, the unfortunate widow. Then the painting moved. At first I thought it was a trick of the lamplight. But no, the woman under the willow straightened. The river's ink surface seemed to flow. Moonlight, painted with a few pale strokes, brightened. A second figure appeared on the bridge. A man. He was drawn with sure, loving lines. Straight back, familiar tilt of the head, the suggestion of a smile. It was my husband. He turned to the woman. She lifted her sleeves and reached for him. They stepped closer, brushstrokes blurring at the edges where ink met ink, as if the artist had not quite dried the lines. On the couch, the real Lu Zhiyuan sat like a corpse. In the painting, his spirit embraced another woman beneath a painted moon. Cold sweat slid down my spine. I watched until my legs went numb and my teeth began to chatter from the effort of holding in my breathing. Outside, the night deepened. A watchman's clapper sounded faintly in the distance, marking the hours. Inside the painting, the two figures stood together until the ink moon began to pale with dawn. At the first grey hint of light through the window, the man on the bridge faded. The woman remained, alone again, head bowed. On the couch, my husband's chest rose with a sudden, sharp breath. He blinked, sat up, ran a hand over his face like a man waking from a very deep, pleasant dream. I pressed myself flatter against the wall, heart pounding in my throat. He murmured to the painting. Soon. Then he stood, straightened his robe, and left the study to begin another day. Over the next week, I hid in that study 3 more times. Each night the same. He drank, sat, eyes emptied. His soul left his body like a man stepping out of his robe and walked into the painting, onto that bridge, to that woman. Each night they stood together a little closer to the centre of the bridge. Each dawn they retreated a little more slowly, reluctant to part. On the 4th night he did not drink. Instead, he took out a folded sheet of paper from behind the painting and knelt by the lamp, reading it by the low flame. Curiosity is a terrible thing. It crawls under your skin and whispers, "Look, look." When he left the room to answer a servant's call, I slid out from behind the bookcase and snatched the paper. The characters were cramped and neat, brushstrokes careful. If love endures beyond death, and the living heart calls again and again, the wandering soul may cross the river of dreams. When the birth hour of the living matches the death hour of the dead, when yin and yang entwine, a bridge may be cast. First, sever the fetters of flesh. Second, anchor the spirit in a vessel. Third, when the stars align, open the door of flesh and invite the soul to reside therein. Then the dead may live again, sharing one body with the living. The host will sleep, the guest will wake. My birth hour. I swallowed. Matchmakers always made much fuss over horoscopes, birth hours and elements, charts and compatibilities. I'd assumed all that talk was for ensuring a peaceful marriage, not for this. My hands shook as I unfolded the bottom of the paper. There, in the margin, he had written 3 names. Lu Juyuan, name of the woman in the painting, 2 delicate characters unfamiliar to me. My own name. The ink on my name was fresher than the rest. At the edge of the sheet, pressed faintly into the paper, I saw the imprint of his seal. Our wedding seal. I put the paper back exactly where I'd found it and slid behind the bookcase just as the door opened. That night, lying on my side, eyes wide open in the darkness of the bridal chamber, I stared at the carved bed curtains and saw instead the ink bridge, the willow tree, the woman in pale robes, the 2 names on the paper. I no longer wondered what I had done wrong. I understood perfectly. My husband had never truly married me. He had married my body. He had needed a vessel with the right birth hour, the right blood, the right compatibility. A living shell, properly matched, to house the soul of the woman he loved so much he would defy death. As for me, the legitimate Marchioness, beloved by the city for one brief day, I was nothing but a room he intended to loan out. Once the ritual finished, once he invited her out of the painting, she would slip into me like a hand into a ready-made glove. I would sleep. She would live in my skin. My heartbeat steadied. The fear that had been clawing at my throat smoothed into something colder. Oh, I thought, so that was it. How very romantic. How very foolish. And how very, very interesting. The next evening, after supper, I walked into his study without knocking. He sat at his usual place on the couch, the lamp already lit, the painting looming above. He turned, startled. "What are you doing here?" "Admiring your art," I said. "It moves me." I crossed the room, stopped an arm's length away from the painting, and tilted my head. "She's pretty," I observed. "No wonder you like to stare at her." His face drained of colour. I saw you," I said. "Several times, in fact. It was very touching, meeting her every night on the bridge like that. I half expected you to compose a poem about it." He stared at me as if I had torn the silk from my face and revealed a ghost underneath. "You shouldn't have been here," he managed. "You can't possibly understand." "I understand you more than you think." I smiled gently. "You are very much in love with a dead woman. You found a painting that holds her soul. You found an old book with old rituals, and a girl with a convenient birth hour to serve as her future shell. You married the shell, ignored it, and now you're merely waiting for the stars to align so you can invite your beloved into my body." His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a cutting board. It isn't like that," he said weakly. "You won't suffer. You won't feel a thing. You'll just sleep. She will live. We will be reunited," I finished for him. "Yes, I read the paper." "You read?" His shock turned to anger. "How dare you touch my things? Do you know how difficult it was to find that painting? Do you know how long I searched for her? How many temples I visited? How many mediums? How much I paid? You think I would let her remain a smear of ink when I can give her life again?" "My lord," I said softly, "you are yelling at the woman whose body you plan to vacate." He flinched. I took a step closer, eyes still fixed on the painting. "Tell me," I murmured, "if the ritual fails, what happens? Does she vanish? Do I die?" "That will not happen," he said stiffly. "Can you swear it?" He said nothing. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, surprising even me. It came out light and almost cheerful. "You should have told me earlier," I said. "I might have lit incense for you, or sharpened your knife." He stared at me warily. "You aren't afraid?" "Afraid? I looked at him fully at last. Of course I'm afraid. I'm not an idiot. But fear is useless unless you decide what to do with it. He took a breath, as if steadying himself. If you cooperate, he said slowly, I can ensure you keep your position. You have managed the household well. She will need you. Think of it as sharing. Many women share their husbands with concubines. You would share your body with a noble soul. So generous, I said. I get to be both wife and house. His jaw tightened. You mock what you don't understand. I understand perfectly, my lord, I bowed. Your love is very moving. You would defy heaven itself for her. How could a mere living wife compete with a dead woman's memory? He searched my face, hunting for the crack in my composure. He didn't see it. How long? I asked. Until the stars align? A few weeks, he said cautiously. The mid-autumn full moon. The bridge will be complete by then. Her soul will be able to cross. I see. I smiled again. Then, for the sake of the household, we must prepare properly. Rituals require clean rooms and steady hands, after all. Suspicion flickered in his eyes. Don't worry, I said. I won't run away. Where would I go? Back to my little lane? If this is to be done, better to finish it quickly. Relief smoothed his brow. Men are always eager to believe we have accepted our fate. Good, he said. You are sensible. I knew you were sensible when I agreed to the match. How lucky for me, I murmured. He didn't hear.
First.
In the days that followed, I became a diligent student. He had left the ritual book on his desk, tucked between poetry scrolls and letters. Perhaps he believed I would not dare to touch his things again. Perhaps he thought I was too stupid to make sense of Taoist diagrams and cramped old characters. He was wrong on both counts. In the afternoons, while he was away at court, I sat in his study with the curtains half drawn, copying the key passages by hand. Anchor the soul with incense and name. Strengthen the bridge with blood and breath. Mark the pulse gate on the host's body with cinnabar. When the soul returns, guide it through the gate and seal with a talisman. A host unwilling will break. A host resigned will sleep. Willing, resigned. The characters looked almost the same on paper. I learned where the pulse gates lay, the places where, according to the old masters, soul and flesh tied together. The point at the centre of the brows, the hollow at the throat, the spot over the heart. I also learned something else. Every bridge could be burned. At the back of the book, in a section half-eaten by silverfish, there was a warning. Once the bridge is cast, and the wandering soul begins to cross, do not sever it midway. To do so invites misfortune. The soul may be trapped between, neither here nor there, unable to reach the flesh or return to its earlier resting place. Trapped. Between. Alive, but not living. I traced the characters with my fingertip. Then I called in one of the older maids and spoke to her in my softest, most delicate tones. Granny Lee, his lordship has been unwell lately. He hasn't been sleeping. See his eyes? Sunken. You must talk to the servants. Keep them away from the study the night of mid-autumn. No one is to enter, no matter what they hear. If they peek, heaven alone knows what unlucky thing they might see. Granny Lee's eyes bulged. Ghost business, madam. Shh, I said. Don't say that word. Just do as I say. For their sakes. She did. Fear is, after all, even more persuasive than coin. The day of the full moon dawned clear and high, the sky a wash of pale blue behind the tiled roofs. The Liu household was busy with festival fuss. Mooncakes arranged on lacquer trays, lanterns hung along the galleries, offerings laid out in the main hall. The old madame fussed over which relatives might arrive unannounced. The stewards fussed over accounts. The servants fussed over everything. My husband fussed over his painting. He'd had the frame cleaned, the wall wiped, the floor in front of it polished. He burned incense beneath it, 3 sticks at a time, the smoke curling up around the bridge like mist. He changed his robe 3 times. He did not eat. When the sun sank, lanterns bloomed in the courtyards like low, captured stars. We performed the usual rites in the main hall. The old madame pressed a sweet pastry into my hand and patted my arm. "You've done well this year," she said. "He's calmer, the household is tidy. When he finally gives us a grandchild, everything will be perfect." I smiled and said all the right words. Afterwards, I walked with my husband to his study. He dismissed the servants at the door. None of them argued. Word of my warning had already spread. Inside the room, the lamp burned low. The moon shone high through the lattice window, its light falling directly on the painting. The bridge was almost complete now. The ink river flowed under it in smooth, dark curves. The woman in pale robes stood at the near side, one hand outstretched towards the space where, I knew, he appeared each night. "Are you ready?" I asked. He took a breath that shook. "I have waited too long," he said. "Tonight, at last, she will cross." "And me?" I asked lightly. "What should I do? Lie down nicely and think happy thoughts while my soul is evicted?" He frowned. "Your soul will not be harmed. It will simply be quiet." "Wonderful," I said. "I'll make sure it doesn't disturb the guests." He chose to ignore that. "Lie here," he said, gesturing to the couch. "When the time comes, I will guide her back to this body. The cinnabar must be drawn over your pulse." He had already prepared the bowl of red paste. The brush lay beside it, a slender thing of wolf hair, its tip stained scarlet. I lay down. The couch smelled faintly of sandalwood and his preferred ink. He dipped the brush and touched it to my brow. The paste was cool and sticky. For a moment, just one, I felt a tremor of genuine fear. What if I'd misread the book? What if my little plan, my stolen scraps of knowledge, were not enough? What if, instead of trapping him, I trapped myself? I swallowed it. Fear is a luxury for people who have time. He drew the mark over my heart, then at my throat. The taste of iron rose in my mouth, though I made no sound. "Remember," he murmured, "you must not resist. Think of nothing. Let sleep take you. When you wake, everything will be different." "I have no doubt," I said. Satisfied, he sat cross-legged on the floor before the painting, facing it, his back to me. He lit 3 sticks of incense, planted them firmly. The smoke curled up in 3 straight, determined lines. He closed his eyes. The lamp flame bent suddenly, as if someone had breathed on it. A chill brushed the back of my neck. The room grew very, very quiet. His breathing slowed. The skin at the nape of my neck prickled. I watched his shoulders. 1 breath. 2. 3. Then nothing. His body remained upright, but the slight living sway was gone. He had turned to lifeless wood. On the wall, the painting stirred. The ink river gleamed. The willow leaves shivered without a breeze. Mist thickened between the painted hills. The woman on the bridge lifted her head. A second figure appeared in the margin of the landscape, emerging from the whiteness like ink dropped into water and spreading into lines. He took shape, tall, familiar. Lu Zhuyuan. He stepped onto the bridge. He turned his head, looking not at her, but somehow through the silk, through the frame. For an instant, I had the dizzy impression that he could see me watching. "My lord," I whispered, too softly for the room, just loud enough for myself. "You always did prefer paintings to people." My hand, hidden in my sleeve, closed around the thing I had brought. Not a knife, not poison. A small square of yellow paper, edges charred slightly where I'd tested the ink. the talisman I'd copied from the back pages of his precious book, the one the author had added a cramped note beside. Use with caution. This seal on the pulse gate as the soul crosses may close the bridge and bar return. The spirit may be trapped between. Do not use lightly. I do very few things lightly. I sat up. His body didn't react. His soul in the painting was too busy walking towards the woman he loved, hand outstretched. I rose from the couch and moved quietly to stand behind him. The cinnabar at my pulse gates tingled. "Forgive me," I murmured, though I wasn't sure to whom I spoke. "But you did start this." I pressed the talisman to the back of his neck, right where skull met spine, right where the old masters said the soul threaded in. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the air tore. That is the only way I can describe it. The space between my hand and his skin seemed to split, like silk ripped by invisible fingers. A wind rushed through the closed room, smelling of incense and river mist. On the wall, the painting convulsed. The bridge warped, its stones bending. The ink river churned. The woman staggered. Lu Juyuan, halfway across, turned, confusion on his face. He had the look of a man who had stepped between two boats and found both drifting away. He opened his mouth. No sound came out. The talisman flared hot under my palm, then went very cold. In the painting, a line of light snapped where the bridge met the bank. Lu Juyuan fell, not into the river, not back to the shore, but through the paper, down into the white space between strokes, into the blankness where no landscape had ever been drawn. For an instant I saw him tumbling, limbs flailing, mouth still forming my name. Then the painting stilled. The river lay calm. The bridge sat empty. The woman stood alone on the far side, staring at the space where he had been. Somewhere between the couch and the silk, my husband's soul no longer had a road. On the floor, his body toppled like a puppet with its strings cut. He hit the ground with a dull thud. I knelt beside him and placed 2 fingers at his throat. Warm, pulse fluttering, weak but present. His eyes were open, wide, glassy, unfocused. "Can you hear me?" I asked softly. Nothing. "See me?" Nothing. Breath in, breath out. No other movement. I sat back on my heels and folded my hands in my lap. "Well," I said to the silent room, "it appears the bridge was more fragile than you hoped." The official story was simple. Late one night, during the Mid-Autumn Festival, Lord Lu had suffered a sudden illness. Some said it was a windstroke. Others whispered that an evil spirit had frightened his soul away. The physicians came with their boxes of needles and herbs. They checked his pulse, peered into his eyes, burned moxa on his meridians. They all agreed on 2 things. First, his body was stubbornly alive. Second, his mind was nowhere to be found. He lay on the bed with his eyes half open, neither waking nor truly sleeping. When I spoke to him, there was no flicker, no twitch, no spark. He must have worried himself ill, the old madam wept, clutching my hand. Endless business, endless duties. He always was too sensitive. "Yes," I said gently. He felt things very deeply. We burned offerings at the family altar. We prayed. We hired monks to chant. The servants hung little paper charms above the doorways. From time to time, in the quiet between one ritual and the next, I went to his study and looked at the painting. The bridge remained empty. The woman in white had changed, though. At first she had simply stood, a figure of stillness. Now her shoulders drooped, her head bowed more sharply. The ink lines of her hair looked messier, as if the brush had wavered. Sometimes, when the lamp flickered, I would almost think I saw, far down between the hills where the silk was thin and the painter's hand had wavered, a small dark shape trapped in the unpainted space, like an ink blot someone had tried to wash away. One evening, alone in the study, I bowed slightly to the painting. "My lord," I said quietly, "I hope the view between worlds is everything you dreamed of." His body lasted the winter. The physicians dosed him. The old madam visited and sobbed. I played the diligent wife, changing his clothes, wiping his face, speaking softly to him as if he might reply. He never did. In the first month of spring, when the plum trees in the rear courtyard were just beginning to bloom, he simply stopped breathing. There was no drama, no last words, no clutching at sleeves. One moment his useless chest rose and fell. The next, it didn't. The house wailed as if struck by lightning. The old madam nearly fainted from grief. The servants threw themselves on the ground. The steward went running for the undertaker. I sat by the bed, hands folded in my lap, and bowed my head. Tears slid down my face, hot and honest. The girl I had been, the one who had smiled behind a crimson veil and believed a public vow meant something, deserved a little mourning. But beneath that, quieter and colder, another feeling sat solid in my chest. Relief. As the legitimate marchioness, I wore white and hemp and cried until my eyes swelled. As the widow of an aristocrat who died without scandal, I also inherited his household. The emperor's decree confirming his death and the transfer of titles arrived with all the expected red seals and formal phrases. The Marchioness of Loo, though still young, has shown filial respect and proper conduct. She shall remain as guardian of the Loo estates until such time as an heir is appointed. He had no son. His cousins, who had sniffed around like wolves around a sick deer all winter, now had to bow to me. They bowed with poor grace. I smiled with perfect kindness. The old madam wept into my sleeve. "You must stay. You're the only one who understands this house. My poor child. If only he had treated you better while he lived." I patted her hand. "The past is like spilled tea, Mother. No use crying over stains. We must look after the living." For the city, it was a tragic love story. The young Marquess devoted himself too much and died early, people said. His poor widow, so dignified, so composed, she must have a heart of gold. No scandal, no concubines, no messy inheritance disputes, others remarked. A rare thing nowadays. I kept the accounts tight, the servants in line, the offerings at the ancestral altar generous. The Loo banners stayed bright at festival time. We sponsored a new roof for a nearby temple. We sent grain to flood-stricken villages. People said the Loo widow was wise and virtuous. No one asked too many questions about what exactly had happened the night his illness began. As for the painting, on the third day after his death, I took it down. The wall looked oddly naked without it. I carried the frame to a small storehouse at the back of the estate, the kind where old furniture went to wait for another life. It smelled of dust and camphor. Light slipped in thin gold sheets between the slats. I set the painting on a low table and lit a single stick of incense. The woman on the bridge stood unnaturally straight, as if someone had propped her up. The ink of her eyes seemed smudged, as if she had been crying for a very long time. Down in the white spaces between the hills, a tiny dark speck moved, almost too small to see. "You knew he was married," I said softly. "Did it matter to you at all? Or did you only need somewhere to stand and someone to love you?" The woman did not answer. Of course she didn't. Whatever spirit had been anchored there, I had no quarrel with her. She too had been used. I stood there for a long time, incense burning down between my fingers. Then I made my choice. I did not burn the painting. That would have been too quick. I rolled the silk with careful fingers, wrapped it in plain cloth, and placed it in a cedar chest. Over it I stacked ledgers, old account books, things no one would feel like disturbing. If anyone ever asked, I would say the painting had been too painful to look at. A widow's sentiment. People would nod and leave it alone. Sometimes, on sleepless nights, I unlocked that chest and lifted the lid just enough to let in a sliver of light. The ink lines glimmered faintly. On the empty bridge, a shadow sometimes flickered, as if someone were pacing back and forth endlessly, searching for a way off that narrow strip of world. I would watch until my heart slowed. Then I would close the lid again. Years pass quickly when you're busy living. The Loom estate prospered. With no husband to overshadow me, I became the steady, acceptable face of the household. I hosted poetry gatherings, politely declined remarrying proposals from opportunistic cousins, oversaw land purchases, and learned which magistrates could be bribed with good wine and which preferred rare calligraphy. Women in the city began bringing their daughters to my door. "Marchioness, how did you win such favour with heaven?" they asked. "To marry so high and yet be widowed young, with wealth and status intact. How fortunate you are." I smiled. If fortune meant crawling out of the role of sacrificial vessel and cutting the bridge someone else had tried to cast through your flesh, then yes, I suppose I was fortunate. On the night of mid-autumn each year, when the moon hung fat and full over the tiled roofs, I lit incense in the ancestral hall, bowed 3 times to my husband's tablet, and said all the proper words. Then, when the servants were busy with lanterns and mooncakes, I walked alone to the little rear storehouse. The chest waited in its corner, patient. I opened it. The painting had faded a little with time. Ink ages like everything else. The willow branches drooped more heavily. The hills looked softer at the edges. The woman on the bridge, if she still stood there, had blurred almost into the mist. But in the white between river and sky, in that thin crack of non-world, something still shifted. "Good evening, my lord," I said. "I hope you are enjoying your view." No answer, of course. Whatever scraps of soul clung there had no voice. It did not matter. I straightened. "Rest well," I murmured. "I will take care of your name, your house, your ancestors, the things you were supposed to protect." I closed the chest. Outside, in the bright courtyards, children ran with paper lanterns shaped like rabbits and fish. Laughter drifted up with the smell of osmanthus wine. I walked back toward the light, my sleeves brushing softly against my skirt, my hairpins chiming once. Once upon a time, I had been the girl behind the bridal veil, heart knocking like a nervous sparrow, hoping my new husband would turn and see me. Now, when I passed polished bronze mirrors, I saw a different woman. Back straight, gaze steady, a faint, sharp curve to her smile. The capital still told its stories. Some said the Marquess of Loo had died from overwork, from caring too much about the people. Others sighed over his tragic romance with a mysterious woman who had died young, his grief so great it had ruined his health. They spoke of me as the gentle widow who had borne it all with grace, who kept his household thriving, who lit incense for him year after year. Let them talk. I knew the truth. Some men build bridges, only to chain women to them. If you live long enough and look closely enough at the foundations, sometimes you find a place to set fire. And when the embers cool, you might just discover that what remains, your own 2 feet on solid ground, your own name, your own body, is worth more than any painted, moonlit dream. And so the Marquess of Lug met a rather unusual fate. His body died peacefully, while his soul remained somewhere between 2 brushstrokes.
Right, so let me get this straight. He married her, purely to use her body for a resurrection ritual.
That appears to have been his plan.
Bold strategy. Slight flaw in the execution.
You believe he miscalculated?
Well, leaving the ritual manual on the desk probably didn't help.
No, that was unfortunate.
Also, maybe don't perform dark supernatural rituals in a house where your wife runs the entire household.
Another fair point.
Honestly, if he was going to betray someone that badly, He should at least make sure she's not smarter than you.
He did seem rather surprised in the end.
Yeah, falling into a cosmic gap in reality will do that.
Still, his wife was quite merciful.
Merciful?
She didn't destroy the painting.
Oh, that's worse.
You think so?
Imagine being stuck in there forever, and she occasionally opens the lid just to check on you.
True.
That's not revenge.
No?
That's being stuck in the cosmic waiting room forever and ever.